It can be said that battles are won by men, but it can also be said that those men are occasionally in giant metal shells that turn the enemy into dust. So today, let's take a look at those giant shells as we explore a general history of tanks. Tanks at their core are just giant armored vehicles that have a cannon that fires a powerful projectile. While a product of the 20th century, the root of this idea go back centuries as humans desire a way to overpower the enemy by brute force. Of course, before the creation of the internal combustion engine, it was an impossible task, but that didn't stop armies from implementing weapons that were close in concept and practice. War elephants were used to charge enemy lines and overpower smaller armies. Most famously associated with Carthage, these elephants were both feared and useful. It would be until the cannon itself that ended the war elephant's use in battle, for obvious reasons. The concept of using armored vehicles in battle is often credited to Leonardo da Vinci, and his famous depiction of a wooden tank armed with guns. In theory, it would have been movable by human power and hand cranks. However, built models have shown it's not quite as efficient as da Vinci intended. Moving forward to the time of engines, the first automotive vehicle with a gun was the Motor Scout. Developed in 1898, it was simply a quadricycle, that's a four-wheeled bike, with a 1.5 horsepower engine, mounted with an iron plate and commonly used a Maxim gun. It was never implemented in battle, but its design was used to support the battle wherever good roads were available, which makes it somewhat limited in use. Designed by the same man, F.R. Sims, the successor to the Motor Scout was appropriately named Motor War Car. Sexy. The first fully armored automotive vehicle, it was never made into battle, but it was far more developed than its predecessor. Featuring a 16 horsepower engine and 6mm thick armor, this thing could reach an astounding 9 miles per hour. Yeah! Two Maxim guns which swiveled around the vehicle could provide extra protection from all angles. It still wasn't quite ready for battle, seeing as it still used wheels. Armored cars were not entirely irrelevant in battle though, as some were used as scout vehicles during World War I. But what were far more useful and more commonplace were the first tanks. The tank itself was originally designed to do one thing alone: to break the Western Front's stalemate and enter enemy territory. To do this, it needed to be capable of deflecting a barrage of countless bullets and rolling over barbed wire from the enemy trenches. With the creation of trench warfare, armored cars weren't really useful in battle. Wonder why? Britain was soon ready to use these armored vehicles in battle, and a prototype was made. Little Willie was the name for this new prototype, and it would go on for the basis of the Mark I, the first actual tank used in battle. The terrain was far too rough for wheels to traverse, and the solution for this was to have now commonplace tank treads, sometimes called the caterpillar track. The Mark I weighed up to 28 tons, and could travel about 4 miles an hour using its 105 horsepower engine. The armor ranged between 6 and 12 millimeters thick, and wasn't armed with a conventional tank cannon, but instead a coastal defense gun that could fire 25 rounds a minute, along with 3 machine guns. As the war continued, the Mark series was improved upon and new designs were used in battle for the rest of World War I. Britain wouldn't be the only nation to take part in this fun with tanks though, as France was developing its own by the end of the war. The first was the Schneider CA-1, which, while often labeled as the first French tank, it lacked a turret, now synonymous with tanks, but was capable of still dealing a moderate amount of damage with a small cannon and 2 machine guns. Russia was unable to release a tank for battle by the end of the war, yet it was deep in research for a vehicle. The most famous of these was the Tsar tank, a massive tricycle that was 27 feet tall. It was armed with 3 cannons, with more planned, and 250 horsepower engines for each wheel. It sounds impressive, but in reality it was easily stuck in rough terrain, and would be poorer against a tank with any moderate firepower. In fact, the prototype was just stuck in the mud and never used again. Germany was successfully able to release a single tank for battle during the war, and it was somewhat of a failure. Named the A7V, it was shielded by thick steel, but its armor wasn't prepared for tank cannons. On roads, it was quite fast for the time, reaching over 9 miles an hour, but off-road it wasn't quite as impressive, as it could easily get stuck in rough terrain. During World War I, tanks certainly were not the game changer that they would grow to become in future wars, but major powers had begun investing in these new vehicles since the battlefield had already begun to change drastically for the past few years. This is Cody of KnowledgeHub.